We are live now. So, very good morning to our esteemed panelists and all the friends who are watching us live on YouTube. I welcome you to this virtual roundtable. Micro Focus presents IT in the post-COVID era. We have very distinguished IT thought leaders on the panel today and a great opportunity to learn from their experiences. I shall introduce them as we go along. I'm very excited to be facilitating the discussion. But before I do that, let me wear my analyst's hat and set the context for the discussion. We at Coeus Age conducted a research in June this year among 230 CXOs. And the theme that emerged was that of DX or digital transformation momentum being punctuated or affected. We further built a debate on that theme among 21 industry thought leaders who collectively agreed that though budgets are cut and reprioritized in the crisis, in many other ways, digital transformation has also been catalyzed. There are many digital aspects that are being put to use, which were otherwise lying underutilized in the enterprise, and a lot of digital has been experienced collectively by the organizations. The top management is more aware and in favor of digital transformation. The survey was done at a time when businesses were responding to the pandemic. But today, in my opinion, there are three critical priorities that every leader, including IT leaders, must address. And what are these three priorities? One, the businesses are looking at regaining their growth momentum and building strategic capabilities to thrive in the future. So they're looking at coming back to normal way of doing business and the regaining their lost growth momentum. Two, they're planning or may have already opened up. So there is this whole gamut of services that is required to assure safety of people and remote working. And three, they are looking at building agility, resilience, and efficiency into their IT operations for supporting the first two priorities. The demand on IT to respond with speed, to engage with customers, support remote working, and ensure physical safety is very high today. New lessons need to be learned on how to build IT management and operations for the new normal that is settling down in businesses. And learning new lessons is exactly what we are going to do today. With those few words, let me now invite my panelists to share their perspectives. In order to achieve the most in the given time, I suggest that each panelist speaks for 4 to 5 minutes to share their views on the three priorities that I highlighted, post which we will have an open discussion. With those few words, let me take the honor of inviting our first speaker, Mr. N. Karthik, who is the country manager for enterprise sales at Micro Focus, to share his opening remarks. Mr. Karthik is a seasoned sales leader and an HP veteran. Started his career with HCL HP in 1995 and moved on to Micro Focus when HP sold its software business to the former. Over to you, Mr. Karthik.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you, the panelists, for taking time out and sharing your information and thoughts with us. As Dr. Kapil mentioned, for us, this has always been a platform where we can learn and learn what you're doing different, how is it we can adopt those, and how we can strive to ensure that we are correct in terms of our engagements and aligned with your thought process and your visions. So what we're seeing during and post the pandemic is that there is a lot of resiliency in the industry, and that resiliency is being driven by, ironically, the fact that the pandemic has actually accelerated the transformation to a digital framework and shifting away from a brick and mortar enterprise into a digital forum or a digital organization has got accelerated, not just punctuated by the fact of by this pandemic. And there are certain drivers which have come out again in the industry overall that we keep seeing and we keep trying to see if we can align with. Cost takeout has become very, very challenging. there is limited cost available, there is limited cash available, I beg your pardon, and a whole focus is there on cost takeout. How do I do more with less? Which brings us to the second part, which is extreme automation. Basic automation of doing mundane tasks and getting that done is a given. How do I do extreme automation in terms of ensuring that with the social distancing and with the SOPs being in place, how can I have the same amount of work being done with a third or in best situations, half the populace in the office? That's a very, very key driver. And how is it we can have RPA or AI and ML solutions actually benefiting to the organization to ensure that productivity norms are being met, at the same time, the SOPs are also still being followed. And last but not the least, as I said, first is cost takeout, second was extreme automation, third is acceleration of DX in terms of omni-channel experience. So the same experience that you're providing for your applications, which is either a revenue generating customer facing app or more critically an internal app which is actually being used and consumed by your own organization, how can I ensure that there is an omni-channel experience which is being provided to the consumer of the application, which is maintaining the same quality standards, if not better? So key drivers, three key drivers that we're seeing emerge constantly. Now this is backed up by a whole series of collaboration of drivers around enablement. You see that people are now spending a lot more time in terms of breaking down the silos and boundaries of individual departments, collaborating a lot better. There is a lot more visibility which is coming into IT, into the entire scheme of things with the from the top management's point of view, because IT has now suddenly come back to become the linchpin of the entire organization. What was there a little time earlier, it has now become a key linchpin in driving this digital transformation. So while it's extremely important that all of us remain safe and healthy, it is also equally important that we use this opportunity to accelerate our transformation on the digital transformation journey. Because we need to be at a situation where we are poised. When we come out of this curve, it should not be a V curve, but it should be a curve which gives us enough ammunition on the grounds in terms of our technology to be able to adopt to the new normal and understand how is it that we can get maximum from the changes that you actually incorporated in the ground. So it's very, very essential for us to keep changing and adopting and pushing the boundary and pushing the envelope, and at the same time learning and adapting from the best practices that are being shared by different visionaries like yourselves. Thank you so much, Doctor.
So that was very, very to the point, succinct, and I would say, uh, putting everything into perspective. Uh, I completely resonate, and I'm sure each IT and business leader would resonate with those two or three agendas that you have highlighted, which has to be relentlessly met. Uh, one is, of course, the handling the cost pressure. Uh, Automate every bit that is possible for extreme efficiencies to be squeezed out of everything. And another, of course, is to create newer experiences for customers and for employees. And I think the challenge is that you have to do both of them together. So they are not, so they are not complementary agendas. They are actually competing agendas, but you have to address them. And I would add another one to it, which is how do you kind of manage risk along with it? The risk of failure, the risk of something not working has also to be incorporated. So I think that's a great start to the conversation. Thank you, Mr. Karthik. We'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to our next speaker, who is Mr. Ranjit Saraf, Director, Product Strategy and Innovation at Unimoney Enterprise Solutions. Mr. Saraf is a product leader with 15 years of experience aimed at crafting superior online payment experiences for consumers and businesses, experienced at designing multi-channel payment systems incorporating multiple forms of online payments, including PPIs, mobile wallets, and link cards. He has crafted CNP, card not present payment experiences, with focus on minimum redirects, ease of checkout, and subscriptions. So over to you, Mr. Sharaf.
Okay. Thank you for having me, Doctor, and arranging this wonderful gathering of industry peers. I'll just give a brief background or some idea from where I will speak my points. So, I come from a predominantly product management background, and for me, IT has always been, rather, I have been an end customer or an internal client to IT and have fought innumerable battles with IT for getting my priorities done and addressed my concerns at top priority and obviously at low cost. So, looking at the current COVID scenario, I feel there are a couple of key imperatives that will drive the current IT stage. And pardon me if I'm biased more towards B2C markets because predominantly that's my background. So what I feel is responsiveness of IT to deliver new business models is one critical aspect. Because what we have seen is, I will give an example here. So this is an example about Swiggy, which is omnipresent, and we all would have experienced their service at some or other stage. So with COVID happening, Swiggy's order booking has fallen down by almost 40%, rather fallen down to 40%, and they have high resources which are struggling to generate any revenue for the company. So that is where the sudden shift has happened in their direction, and now they want to go hyper local into grocery management. And imagine a situation where a grocer in some remote corner of a city or a tier 2 or a tier 3 city, the system needs to integrate uh, his availability of inventory. So the integration should be to that level where his inventory is visible to the end consumer in his mobile app on his hand, and that is when he will be placing order. So this is immensely complex solution, and with idle resources and losses mounting, companies like Swiggy will have to be very nimble and shift their course. And that is where I feel IT should be responsive and nimble enough to respond to such major business paradigm shift. So that is one criteria. Second is data. Data is the new currency. So again, coming from a payment background, we would all have done some payments on POS machines in our experience at physical stores. So these POS machines generate immense data at the back end about consumer payment habits and about the retailers' businesses. So the data points, they have led these POS companies to start a completely new business line, which is lending to these merchants. So basis the transactions that happen, the volumes that he moves, and by analyzing all this data, they can create a risk profile of this merchant and lend him money, and then they can manage the collection of this money against the daily settlements. So this is something which basis data they have started doing. So again, COVID generated a need for funds to be pumped into the system to enable these small and medium enterprises to survive. And that is where this data is being generated, and businesses have found a new direction. And then finally, it is also important to build a high performing infrastructure. So this is again important from a point of view because if you look at online commerce, OTT, content delivery, or education and technology kind of companies, the entire world is going either work from home or online. And the multiple avenues have increased for consumption of these data points and these services and the content that is being shared. So again, once the life resumes as regular, then these enterprises are not sure whether their investments in on-prem systems are going to be sustained. So enterprises are thinking about, say, hybrid infrastructure, which is a mix of cloud and on-premise solutions. So I believe building these kind of high-performing infrastructure to support businesses is one critical aspect. And finally, extended ecosystem. So there are many. You would have heard of concept of open banking APIs. So banks are now generating newer services which they are exposing their APIs to the external parties. And now businesses are also following this model. primarily consumer-focused businesses, and they are offering multiple services which can be consumed by third-party app developers and external people. And I believe every organization should have IT arm which is nimble and capable enough to integrate into these multiple extended ecosystem partners and increase their what you can say, increase their reach in the market and enrich the consumer offering. So I feel these 4 or 5 points will be more important or decisive in defining the IT imperatives for the companies in this post-COVID scenario. For So further up, the application design and delivery management. This is again one critical aspect because what I feel is, again, here I will give one example of a bank. So with COVID happening, government pushed many schemes to deliver funds to SMEs for sustenance, and these funds were channeled through banks. And suddenly, banks were posed with a challenge of having to set up a completely new system to disburse these amounts. Now, people are not able to reach out to offices, people are not able to travel or do some physical activity. So, everything needed to be moved online. So, the bank relied heavily on agile teams. There were daily team huddles happening. There were discussions completely in remote and virtual settings, and bank did manage to set up a complete new infrastructure which enabled these kind of merchants reaching out to these SMEs and delivering loans to them, including doing their KYC and risk profiling. So this just shows in which direction the application delivery and design is moving. It's going to be a complete virtual setting for that. I think these are my few initial points on the discussion points listed. Yeah.
I think that was simply great. You have brought in the entire perspective of how businesses are driving, new imperatives for IT from infrastructure as well as application development and deployment perspectives. Simply great. I think you have been able to squeeze a lot from your experience, and coming from someone who is the customer, an internal customer for IT, I think it makes immense sense for all the IT leaders who are with us on the panel, as well as who are watching us live, on YouTube. So some of the points which you mentioned is, I remember you talked about the need for high performance infrastructure and how a hybrid environment would evolve for the costs to be contained, as along with the infrastructure to be highly available and elastic. And second, you talked about how COVID situation has forced the need for adopting agile development methods. So thank you so much, Mr. Saraf. We will come back to it. I think you have given enough food for thought. So let's listen to others, and then we'll come back to
Sure.
these points again during the discussion. Thank you. So I think with that, let me come to my third speaker, who is Mr. Praveen Hebagodi. And Mr. Praveen Hebagodi is from NetEnrich. Just give me a second. I will. Wait a second. Yeah. So Mr. Praveen Hebagodi is a CTO with NetEnrich, and he's based out of Bangalore. And with his years of experience, he has been designing IT systems that are not only aligned with businesses, but also takes multiple but perspectives of dealing with costs and handling efficiency and be future ready. So with those few words, over to you, Mr. Hebagodi.
So this pandemic situation is quite interesting for all of us. The Digital transformation, as we were talking, I no longer see it as digital transformation anymore. It's a digital mandate. It's not a choice. And one of the first things that most of the CIOs and the enterprises that I'm working with is actually hitting as a problem is they're still stuck in bimodal world where 60 to 70% of their existing spend is towards running their current business, which actually includes running the way the ITIL world, the ITIL world has dictated over the several years. They need to figure out how to shift their investments and budgets towards transformation, and that's a tricky one to actually solve, given um, given the kind of requirements that is there to actually go towards transformation, both in the face of COVID, as we actually talked about, the budgets are pretty limited. And how to really approach doing something like that. As one of the panelists actually mentioned, automation is very key. The way I look at approaching this is peeling the layers a little bit more around automation. AI ops becomes very, very critical. And from an AI ops standpoint, today the industry is still stuck at noise reductions, which is very critical. But beyond noise reduction, we should actually look at, hey, how do we really bring in more context when we actually solve the problem? That way, the operations teams are a lot more effective independently working out of their homes to be able to resolve issues, given that the traditional ITIL world is not really agile in nature. It's very tier structure. You have L0, L1, L2 structures, which is completely not productive in the new era, especially in this age of where people are actually doing work from home and remote operations. So automation becomes very critical, where you're actually looking at reducing noise, you're looking at building context, and you want to bring in people not in ticketing mode from L1, L2, L3 kind of structures, which will take forever and it's going to take a lot more time given the current scenarios. We should actually innovate and figure out ways to actually bring in what we call a swarm model, where you bring in people to solve a problem together at a time. The other key imperative I actually see is moving away from very infrastructure centric mind. It becomes very critical for all of us to start looking at ourselves as a service provider to either internal organization or to the external organizations. And we need to track our services that we're responsible for. The digital services start moving away from SLA mindset, which is very contractual in nature, to service level objectives, to error budgets, and really be responsible for the outcomes on the services. And a large amount of innovation that has actually happened in the last 4 to 5 years, the way I look at it from DevOps standpoint, from the tools that are available in the market, do facilitate things like that. It's just the mindset we need to really shift to be able to get into actually running the services. With folks working out from remote locations, we always had folks working out from offices, work from home was a norm, but we never kind of moved around our processes to facilitate a environment like that, right? It was just probably we were doing VPNs and a bunch of other stuff, and those traditional mechanisms is not really scaling, right? I actually keep hitting a lot of customers who are having challenges in scaling their concurrent VPN connections from what used to be a norm of 800 to 1000 to 10,000, 15,000. They're pouring in investments. And in the whole process, things are not really scaling. We have to relook at the whole way people are actually working from home. And that exposes the security risks. The security aspect traditionally has been focused around perimeter. And endpoint security, of course, was a big movement in the last 8 to 10 years. However, we got to really look at the whole traditional mechanism and move in towards things like identity access management, zero trust. Now that's about protecting users and from users. The infrastructure wise, we need to really be cognizant about attack surface, the entire attack surface that enterprise is exposing to adversaries and threat actors. And these include all kinds of assets that we don't really normally manage as an IT, like a lot of shadow IT stuff, simple things like your certificates for your domains getting expired can actually expose a lot of opportunities for hackers to actually get into the system. Being able to continuously monitor, not just do pen testing once a month or once a quarter and then say that, hey, for compliance, I've got tick marks done as security. We no longer can rely on those mechanisms for actually securing our stuff, protecting our external attack surface, tracking our internal attack surface, having really strong SOC practices and really tools in place becomes very critical. The third aspect from companies who are actually approaching automation from an AI standpoint, we talked about it. There's a lot of data that is actually getting generated. In our experience of actually solving this problem for several years, what we actually see, IT operations is in a it's pretty different than the rest of the analytics world. Here, what is very critical is building a AI-based system or an intelligence system that actually collaborates and works in a synergistic way with the human intelligence. A lot of problems in IT is very dynamic in nature. And a lot of problems can't be really trained with the data alone. It has to be nimble enough to be able to include analysts as a part of the decision-making process. And we don't really have time to actually hand off the data to data scientists. Data scientists take a look at it, and then the IT guys work on it. This has to happen in time, right? You don't want you want your MTTR, the time to resolve incidents, to typical predict and protection kind of an operation that you're doing, to be done in really short amount of time. This involves for us to rethink our automation efforts into how do we really make it cognitive AI, how do we really make it enabled so that the analyst can actually take part in with the machines synergistically to actually drive the outcomes. The final point is the leverage of public cloud is going to, we see that it's going to actually get increased primarily from the standpoint of platform as a service, because the amount of investment that we have to do to manage and run the services on the cloud gets reduced. The adoption, we would expect that to actually increase. More and more PaaS solutions probably will get adopted, which actually comes with inherent amount of security and inherent amount of reliability. But given that the IT and the DevOps and the rest of us actually should start thinking about how do we really upskill our knowledge into new age of thinking, right? Changing our mindset around automation, changing our mindset around agility, and changing our mindset around skills becomes very important, right? Your firewalls are moving to cloud. Your mechanisms of doing firewalls have changed. Your endpoint detection is actually talking to cloud all the time. So things are actually very, very different. Staying connected becomes important. At the same time, the technologies that are driving these outcomes are evolving at a rapid pace. We need to really keep ourselves up to the skills that are required to manage them, understand them, and be able to operate them. Those were my points, Kapil.
Thank you, Mr. Abagodi. That indeed was very, very inspiring, and I think you have demonstrated the fact that you come from a hardcore engineering side, and you have been able to kind of map how technology has evolved and where it is today and how it is going to move forward. So you have brought in the elements of AI ops, the importance of automation, the way security designing is changing, and how cloud is going to be a game changer. And of course, the biggest thing is not just about skills, but also about the mindset. Thank you so much for that very, very inspiring and detailed view in a very short span of time. So I'll come back to you. Let's hear to other panelists, and then we will open for discussions. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you. So my next speaker is Mr. Harbinder Singh Banga, who is the CTO of Samvardhana Motherson Group. Over a rapidly progressive career of 18 years, Mr. Banga has gained expertise and experience in various facets of IT management, including implementation and support of IT infrastructure, networks, hardware and software projects for large user base, mostly in logistics and transport industry. He has substantial experience in heading and managing projects on ERP, CRM, VoIP, IoT, and cloud. So over to you, Mr. Manga.
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kapil. Thank you for the introduction. Just a quick check, I'm audible. Okay, thanks for the confirmation, Karthik. So, most of others pairs also talking about the same. So I think the imperatives are same for all of the businesses, but there are different way of looking at each and every business. So for us, actually, one of the important thing here is that performing together with the ecosystem is something a key. So if you look at the kind of business we are into, the kind of value chain which we are handling is something requirement comes from one side, then there is a different uh, uh, channels who take those requirement, then that requirement comes to the producers from a different channel again, and then suppliers have to serve that on service to them, these requirement producer, and suppliers are dependent on the sub suppliers. Material is coming from different countries, different various areas. So our one of the key imperative here is that we have to develop the complete ecosystem. We have to make the ecosystem stronger. So with this COVID, let's say you taken a scenario where a few of the organizations are knowing it, they know how to handle it, and few of the organization within the value chain are not able to cope up with that particular automation. Then also it is half. So one of the key thing which we have started focusing is that why not bring the whole ecosystem into this level of automation. Not just our company, we should look into industry level, we should look into a complete value chain where you have more structured player, unstructured player, playing around. So I think that is something which we have to look into as a key imperative. That is what we have also started, and I think most of these industries will go that way, from the building the extended ecosystem automated rather than the organization automation. Second big parameter, when everyone is talking about like data is new currency, data is new crown, and so on. So idea is that let's get into that. So we are really getting into scenarios where we are generating an experience from that data. So we have a lot of stages which we are defining it here, that what is the stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So because every stage you are getting a data, you are getting us insights to take a some actions, starting from predictive to prescriptive, or so on. So I think creating experience with the help of that data is another insight which we are looking in. Along with that, we all are looking from the monetization perspective also, whether if we can bring the monetizations also out of that data will be a good parameter for all of us as a business leaders. The key thing which every other pairs also mention about the infrastructure here, that is also very important, where we should have a high performing digital infrastructure. When I say high performing digital infrastructure, we are very keen about that infrastructure. That infrastructure should be purely on the digital pattern. It should not be a bandage at all. So I have seen there are certain infrastructure mix of multiple environments, and then security breaches and other issues are there. So we should the key third parameter imperative is that we should have a clear cloud and digital strategy to move forward. And we should look into a way that we should not be managing in a bandage fashion, but a clear foundation for next goal of the businesses. I think that is from my side to start with.
That was short and sweet, Mr. Banga, and I completely concur with what you are saying. Coming from a supply chain uh, domain, I think the focus on building an extended enterprise cannot be, underplayed anymore. The way businesses are operating today, they are not operating in silos. We heard from Mr. Saraf about open banking and how the financial domain is not individual players in isolation, but all of them put together in the form of ecosystem. And the strength of the ecosystem is more important than the strength of the organization today. So I completely concur with your point, and you very nicely brought out the aspects of data and creating experience based on the data, and of course how that data can be monetized. So thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. I'll come back to you once we have listened to our two other panelists. Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Banga.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Mr. Uh, Pankaj Pandit, who is the CIO of Oberoi Realties. Mr. Pandit has 25 plus years of experience, of which 13 years is in leading IT teams in the user organizations and around 6 years in IT services delivery, rendering solutions and services for varied industries, manufacturing, chemicals, real estate, IT, and ITS. Today, he has the overall responsibility for the entire IT function and is focused on creating business value through digital technologies. So over to you, Mr. Pandit. You'll have to unmute yourself, Mr. Pandit. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kapil, and thanks to all the other panelists. And they have already covered quite a few points, so I will not be repeating them. Let me come to this situation from business perspective. So as you all know, reality business has a very unique flavor to it and very different from the other businesses, those we talked about. So what happened is when this COVID thing happened, the first impact was that nobody was in the office. And as we all know, everybody working from home and all these things. So one of the key impact what happened is how do you keep the organization running in this situation? So collaborative tools suddenly came into play to a very large extent. I mean, when I joined ORL, which is just 6 months back, the first of the things which I wanted to do was to bring people onto digitally collaborative platforms, because we work with a lot of consultants, we work with a lot of contractors and all that. So now these initiatives, though we were trying to do change management, now suddenly came into focus and everybody was onto collaborative platforms like Teams, Zoom and all that. So we all know that. Now this, of course, required a lot of infrastructure in terms of how do you manage the powerful infrastructure. Now for collaboration, the cloud also comes into play. How does the, all this digital documentation transfer and all those things happen? So how does one collaborate with your architects, with your consultants, structural consultants? Now suddenly the ecosystem, the digital ecosystem became the focal point. And that is one thing that, came to the center stage. The second thing those happened is that as a reality player, we are using a lot of paper-driven processes. Now, digitizing those paper-driven processes became quite important because otherwise the operations won't happen. So, digital technologies, those are enabling these kind of paperless workflows, and paperless documentation also became a focus. The third thing is real estate, as you understand, is a touch and feel product. It is something that people do not buy online per se. We, of course, it's a very high value product and low volume in terms of sales. I'm talking about basically residential real estate. How does one sell in COVID situation? The biggest impact on it happened on real estate is no site visits. Without site visit, who is going to buy a real estate product that is worth crores? How does one give? I mean, people have to visit sites, they have to look at show flats, they need to look and feel the surroundings and all that. Now, creating that kind of experience online became a paramount thing for us, because then only then you will be able to hope, you will be able, you hope to sell something. Now, here, all the virtual reality kind of experience has to be created. One has to give a reality, real experience, as if now we are not able to give touch and feel here, but at least the visual experience we will have done. The drone technology, the entire show flat, everything to be made available online, where you can be exposed to a walkthrough kind of an experience. Now suddenly this was earlier also important, but now this has become like a lifeline, because how does one generate sale without that kind of an experience? So this is one thing which is, as a technology, is unique to real estate, and I'm sure it will be similar for even auto and other similar businesses as well. And other things are like, one has to now ensure that construction happens in a very seamless fashion. So it has to happen in minimum kind of a time and cost, and overruns have to be minimized. I mean, this is always a requirement, but in terms of this environment, when there are enormous pressures on the business, this gets looked into through a magnifying glass. And the technologies, those enable that kind of, cost savings and sharpness in execution. Those have become very important. So technologies, those allow to build digital twins of a building. The technologies, those allow flawless material takeoff. The technologies, those allow flawless construction with negligible rework and required quality. Paperless sites. These kind of technologies have suddenly become a focus point. Earlier also, people were investing in these kind of technologies, but from the business perspective, again, this has come to the fore. It has become a focus point of the organization. So these are the 3-4 points which I would like to put across to the panel, which were not touched earlier by Ranjit and Arvinder and Praveen as well. So these are things which are unique to our business, and because of this COVID, they have become a priority for the management. So that's it from my side, Dr. Kapil. In the interest of time, I think I'd like to stop
No,
here.
that was, I think, very, very to the point, and very specific to the domain from where you come from. I quite liked the phrase that all these things were important earlier, but I think what they also became urgent now. So when things are important and they also become urgent, the management looks into them and puts focus and money behind them. So I think you highlighted some very relevant points, and the most important and the relevant one which I found is the use of emerging technologies like drones to create customer connect, and also looking at a completely paperless operation, and use of technology to build houses where minimum amount of rework is done and high quality can be produced. So I think that's very, very insightful and interesting. So I'll come back to you. Let's hear to our last speaker on the panel, and then we will open for discussions. Yeah, thank you. So with that, we come to our next speaker, who is Mr. Santosh Giranje. He's has 20 plus years of ITES and data center experience in core infrastructure, and he's currently managing the command center operations or command center department at Eaton Technologies. So over to you, Mr. Giranje.
Thank you, Dr. Kapil. I hope I am audible. And I would like to move ahead with a simple quote. Any change, even a change for the better, is always accompanied by drawbacks and discomforts. And I would like to tell you like why I have taken this quote today is because of the incident which happened over the weekend, wherein we all observed there was outage in the Microsoft Azure as well as the Office 365 services, and due to the new fix which was rolled out, and of course, I would like to highlight here, of course, that the most important part or piece is testing in every change or in every new feature we are adding. And coming back to the points which other panelists, of course, all the senior people who mentioned is about the automations which we are bringing, about the RPA or the robotic technology which is coming in place, or AI for that matter. We need to ensure that whatever we are bringing in, we need to understand that this should get the entire focus on the um, performance, along with that the availability of services. When we are talking about the work from home, I remember the times when the project managers and program managers always used to say that, hey, I am having this critical piece of work in our project, and I don't want that to happen from home. Hence, I want all the team members in office or maybe at on-site or at data center while doing or performing that work. Now, when we look at this scenario, when everyone is at home, or maybe most of the team members who are part of that team are at home, how we are going to do that? How we are going to collaborate? So collaboration is one of the important piece which we need to look at. That how we are collaborating and ensuring that the every piece, every bit of it is tested. Along with that, it is considered by the project team. Along with that, the dynamic way of handling the data, the dynamic way of handling the reports, that is very important, as that will bring out the real time analysis and its outcomes, which will help the technology drivers, along with that the CIOs or CTOs of the organization, to take strategic steps and decisions. So I would like to just bring these 2 points which are very important, and that will definitely help all of us to grow along with this new changing times, wherein we have most of the people working from home, or in an environment wherein we have to more focus on this simple laptop which we are having from home, and still able to be able to collaborate and ensure that we perform to the up to the mark of expectation from our CIOs and CTOs. And with that, I would like to give back to Dr. Kapil. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh. Very, very short and sweet. And I completely kind of resonate with what you said. Our window to the world is our laptop, and with an internet connection, we are on, and we are kind of completely productive. However, there is a lot of work that is being done behind the scene in terms of fine tuning the infrastructure, the applications so that they are available all the time, and we don't feel the pains of the disruption that has come our way. And I completely agree that change brings in a lot of discomfort and, of course, pain at times. But without going through that pain, it is not possible to cope with the kind of crisis that we're into. Okay, so with that, let me now bring all my esteemed panelists on the screen and get into an open and, you know, yeah. So thank you so much to each one of you for sharing your thoughts, share giving insights from your business about technology. And what I learned, and being an analyst, my mind always worked towards structuring things. So it's a very complex world. Once you structure, then it becomes little easier for a non-technology person like me to kind of cope with the volume of insights that has come. So we all talked about certain business imperatives. We started with Mr. Karthik. He talked about the cash pressures and the emerging imperative to become more efficient. Others talked about customer experience and the need to build ecosystem capabilities rather than organizational capabilities. So there are these business imperatives which are rising, and of course collaboration in a situation where we are all part of a fragmented organization. The organizational boundaries are broken, and we are all working from wherever we are. So there are these business imperatives that have become real today, and on the other hand are the technology imperatives where IT has to be available all the time. We are talking about a more complex world of IT, which is on-prem and cloud, a hybrid of them. How do we manage them? How do we manage data in a way that it becomes the center of our operations, and how we can monetize that data? And then there are, of course, technologies which help you meet the business imperatives with the technology imperatives. So you have cloud, you have automation, you have AIO ops, hybrid cloud management services, and plethora of other technologies which are there. So that's what I understand from what each one of you have spoken based on your experience. So let me now pose a little more broader question. While we are all dealing with these business imperatives and tech imperatives, what do you think are two or three key areas where technology leaders like yourself will be focusing upon in the next, say, 6 to 12 months time, to make the infrastructure and applications more ready for the kind of situation that we are into? So it's an open question. We can start with anyone.
Dr. Kapil, I would like to just add a point here on. I would like to focus definitely on one plane of glass, which will give me a dashboard of where my IT services are. If it is my infrastructure, my applications, any alerting systems, it is giving me that. And that way I'll be able to handle it better with low downtime and better latency, better SLAs. So that is something I will focus on. And self heal is something that as would be my second end, so that I don't want a human intervention to resolve a known error or issue. If self heal can be introduced or can be focused on. Thank you.
Very interesting. I think you're talking about the use of analytics and AI machine learning in infrastructure and applications management. Yeah,
that's right.
Very interesting. Yeah. So
just extending to that point, I think from an automation standpoint, I think one of the key things that we focus, I touched upon this a little bit earlier, the the elimination of toil, toil being something that's a mundane activities that people are doing. And a lot of time, the mindset that is there from when you actually do automation is to do the most difficult aspect of your job, and you kind of oversee the real areas where you could actually automate things that are revolving around your processes, things that actually encompass a lot of human activities. So elimination of the toil actually becomes quite critical from an approach standpoint. This includes things like, as mentioned earlier, self-heal, reducing the noise. There's too much noise. There are too many alerts that are coming with the system. The more and more systems, the more and more tools you implement, there are just way too many things that are happening, and the tools don't really talk to each other really well, right? So how do we really bring all of them together, eliminate the toil? That becomes, I would think, very important. The other piece is the, the touching upon the little bit more on the mindset. So we need to start looking at this as an opportunity. As was mentioned earlier, the mindset is changing in this environment, right? Earlier, when there was a product release, we wouldn't let people work from home. Now that's no longer even a point of discussion, right? So that's a mindset change. Similarly, we need to look at mindset change in terms of how we operate. What are the processes we are actually following, right? Is L1, L2, L3 structures really meaningful anymore? Right? We have a problem at hand. We need to bring in people, everyone together, and then solve it. How do we really think about the swarm models, not really the traditional things that we have been doing in the last 20, 25 years? So that becomes kind of very critical. And also the other piece is, don't look at infrastructure as infrastructure anymore. That's people stopped monitoring CPUs and disks actually many years back. Still, we continue to do that, right? We need to actually start thinking from the standpoint of how, as software developers, as engineers, we actually approach software design. Similarly, from an IT operation standpoint, we need to start thinking from a standpoint of how do you really look at the outcomes of a services, right? Do service level monitoring, service level objectives, the error budgets that run around it. So that kind of encompasses a lot of infrastructure underneath, but that mindset becomes very critical. That if we don't really manage it, going beyond your traditional queues to the structured way of just handling tickets, doing hot potato from one team to another, we should kind of drop all of that mindset and then start thinking, hey, there's a problem, reduce the noise, make sure that you're scoring and prioritizing it right. Let's identify the right people, jump into the problem and solve the issue. Right, so building tools and automation to facilitate that, along with the mindset change, I think it's very critical in the next 12 months to come.
So, Dr. Kapil,
yeah, please go ahead.
So basically, we all are talking about in some way automations to happen. So I think the key focused area for us will be the data quality, because in past, I'm sure everyone have done projects like BI and analytics, and now we are talking about artificial intelligence and that level of machine learning and MLDL and other technologies coming around. So the data quality is key here, because now we are banking on the machine, and we are trying to look, and machine is going to take a decision. Let's take an example on the road. So I'm again going back to the supply chain management and the logistics again. So if let's suppose drone or any machine have to take a decision whether it has to be left or right, and one is that based on the route, another is that based on the experience and based on the situation. Now when it comes to situational, left or right, it has to be correct, because otherwise it will be a chaos on the road. So somewhere the data quality, we all have to focus for bringing these automation really happens, because until unless these quality will not be there in the data, these machines will not be going to take the right decisions, as per my understanding and experience, whatever the prototyping I have done from that standpoint.
Of course. I think without good data and a sizable amount of data over a period of time, the machines won't learn the right things. Of course, that goes without saying. And I think organizations will find ways and struggle with this challenge as they move ahead in terms of exploiting data. And coming back to Mr. Hebegodi's point, I think you made certain very relevant points. You talked about eliminating the toil, and even if there are tools available to automate certain mundane activities, manual activities, the enormity of the number of these tools can be overwhelming at times. So how can the system takes on the power to decide what tool to use, where to use, and how to use? So there is a minimum human intervention that is possible. Is that what you were trying to say, Mr. Abegodi?
That's correct. So the key challenge we have is, on average, enterprises having 17 different tools, and tools don't really talk to each other. I mean, they talk to each other, but intelligence doesn't really flow. Right? The focus should be about how do we really create that intelligence layer. That becomes important, I would think.
And I think that relates with what Santosh was saying, that I need a glass pane where I need a dashboard where data quality is ensured, data sources are integrated, and I get a view so that I don't make mistakes and I take decisions faster. So I think in a way, three of you are talking about the same challenge, looking at it from different point of views. And of course, the way softwares are designed, and there are different mindsets applicable to them. Similarly, the core IT design and the mindset with which you design the core IT also has to be focused upon and looked at. So I think you made a very valid point, Mr. Abegodi, about an outcome driven design rather than a process centric design where you have L1, L2, and L3. The final this thing is to solve the problem faster and more effectively. Yeah. So Mr. Pandit,
Dr. Kapil,
you
I
had
like to add to what I think Sandeep was saying in terms of dashboard. So
yes,
when I look at the whole picture from CIO perspective, IT dashboards are, yes, most welcome, but the dashboard will have to be prepared for the CEO. So the business cockpit that every CEO so badly wants to keep tab on so many business parameters, be it revenue, be it cost, be it operational efficiencies, where he should hit, where he should look into, deep dive into, and all. It's a very typical requirement of every top boss, and I'm not sure how many times these kind of dashboards are actually made available by IT to them. So with all these tools now, and with very less human contact per se, I think this kind of dashboards at a CEO level will really play a great part. And just one more point, because I need to log off in 2 minutes. I need to get into another call. In terms of RPA, sir, yes, one is using AI, yes, but RPA to automate mundane tasks has also really become a priority, and we are already working on those fronts where many of the processes are really mundane, and there are not much thought value addition per se needed to execute that process. And there also the physical absence of employees gives RPA kind of initiatives a priority. When I look at the whole business landscape from IT perspective, RPA is going to be a priority for us as well, and we are already working on that. So with these, I would like to sign off, sir, and I wish all the panelists great day and great time ahead. And let's come out of this, hope to come out of this pandemic at the earliest. Let's pray, keep the fingers crossed. Thank you so much, sir. I would like to sign off.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much from both Coeus Age and Micro Focus's side, and we will connect with you.
Thank you so much. So, bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Be safe.
So with that, thank you. Same to you, sir. Thank you. So, Mr. Saraf, is there anything you would like to add? Being an IT user, would you like to add something here? You'll have to unmute. One second. Yes.
Yeah. So what we have seen is due to this COVID times, the consumption of online services has increased, and thereby payment requests coming to our service have increased. So basically, we run a payment service and we enable payment gateway for multiple online merchants. So now there a new offshoot has come up is there are many subscription models that are coming up. So earlier, online purchases were restricted to products purchase or services purchase. Now with subscription industry, OTT, so many apps, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Z5, Woot, you can simply count at least 20 apps and all these payment requests coming to various service providers. So what we have seen is these subscription renewal requests that hit our platforms. They hit us in in high volumes. And the thing with subscription renewals is that the merchant will always keep on retrying the transaction till he gets a success. And that just brings inordinate load on the systems because we don't know which is the cycle preferred by that merchant. The load could suddenly happen midnight, the load could suddenly happen during BAU and regular business hours. So I believe a self-healing system, the point which Mr. Santosh spoke about, so that is very critical. And with our system, as in we are in process of migrating our application to cloud. And self-healing system is one concept that I am focusing on and trying to get some insights on that. And I believe that is the way to go because in these times, if it is office, yes, you can have a person at desk. But once I am in home, I could have some local errands to run. I could have some family member to look after, and I might not be simply at my desk to address the critical calls. So a
True.
self-healing system, in my opinion, is an answer to this.
So a self-healing system or an adaptive system. So it adapts to the sudden spurt in load or sudden changes which are happening in multiple variables,
Yes.
which to a human mind may take a little while to understand and gaze, but for the system it is easier. So I coming back to you, Mr. Karthik. I think so much the gentlemen have spoken. I think there is enough food for thought that is available to you. What would be your take on this? So you started with a broad business imperatives and how technology is shaping. What is that you'll have to add to what has been discussed so far? Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. It's amazing to hear, but I actually did have a few questions, and specifically to both Mr. Banga and to Mr. Saraf right now. Don't you think this whole concept of self-healing is a little over-bandied? And while I get, the point that Santosh is making about one single pane of glass, and I'll more than happy to help you there, more than happy to help you with this migrations that you're doing into cloud. A lot of those are very, very standard stuff. If we can help, we can definitely help. There are 2 points I just wanted to really just reach out before I get to my point. That's more to Mr. Banga and Mr. Saraf what they just meant. Mr. Banga, you mentioned something about monetization of data, right? And Mr. Saraf, what you mentioned something earlier, which is about self-healing and again, some of getting them to link together. Isn't this a little too much of a wish list at this point of time for both of you? Well, not for both of you, for the industry in particular. To have adaptive infrastructure is fine. When we start looking at the concept of self-healing, self-remediation to the extent that the applications which are moving out to the cloud, there's an outage, there is a basic problem that happens that gets resolved, that's a given. But when you are mentioning about self-healing, where exactly are you coming from self-healing? What is it that you are trying to convey here? And sorry, Dr. Kapil, it's probably not the path that you want to do, but I just want to understand this.
Okay. So to elaborate on my understanding or my background on self-healing system. So when we process online transactions, so there is some kind of a smart or a dynamic routing element involved in here. And we tend to find out basis the card number, which is the issuer. And if that issuer is ICICI Bank, and luckily we have ICICI Bank's payment gateway at our end, then we tend to process these transactions with that bank so that it is easier. There are minimum redirects because the transaction requests don't need to go through the bank again to Visa, Master, and then further. So this is a logical chain, and if I am able to reduce number of hops here, then possibility of a transaction dropping is very low. Now,
Understood.
this is a smart routing concept. Now, when I come to self-healing system, so an analogy to this is that suddenly my system, initially it's a cloud deployment, and my system was configured to manage a load of say 500,000 transactions in a day and a peak of say X. And due to these sudden spike in subscription renewals, this X is being breached. Then the elasticity of the platform, or the elasticity of the platform that is being offered to us, that allows us to accommodate these additional transactions. And in that process, if some kind of I can say KYC verification services or compliance related modules, they tend to malfunction and not do the relevant activity. So that is where these need to be caught. And in line with the elasticity and increase in processing capabilities, these modules also should be able to
Scalable enough.
take in these additional transaction load. So that is where I want to have a self-healing system, that it should move dynamically from processing X to now processing X plus 4 or X plus
Very good.
5.
Got it. Understood. Understood that. Got it. Very, very clear. Thank you. And Mr. Banga, you mentioned something about monetization of data. What exactly was the concept that you were trying to drive there?
Right, right. So basically, like, if you, how this could be a priority, like, if you look at the scenario where, everybody is looking the challenges into the opportunity. So one is that, and second is that, we have to create a business values out of it. That is what we are looking at, that, creating a new business models to create a new business values in a these kind of scenarios. That is the key around it. But having said that, monetization from a different platform become important at this point in time. You take an example of a kind of business houses who are relying on the businesses where there is the physical presence, physical good, physical things are only required. So they were in the trouble at this point in time in during the COVID. The people who were diversified digitally to a different level of businesses, they have at least some source of income still going on. So like if you look at the example for the organizations like giving the IT services, they were not impacted by this pandemic more. So I think from that standpoint, the lesson is that you should have that a digital segment also to monetize as a additional layer to the business.
Understood. Absolutely great. Great. Sorry, Dr. Kapil, I just had to get that thing clear.
Sure.
From my point of view, I'm actually extremely delighted because uh, we do have our thought process as an organization is to operate in absolutely similar and identical areas that can probably touch your innovation journey. So whether it is approaching everything as a service, as Praveen was mentioning, or approaching the entire infra layer and offering that as a service so to ensure that there is availability and the noise gets reduced, to what Mr. Saraf is mentioning, to a certain extent. While I do have solutions which span your area of virtualizing the service and ensuring that there is elasticity built in into the application layer and the infra layer, I think we need to have more detailed discussions to understand how we can collaborate that better. To an absolutely straightforward requirement to have, as Mr. Uh, Pankaj Pandit was mentioning about persona-based dashboards, which you wanted to present to the management, and how we can play in that area. We do have solutions in that space also. As a what we are seeing, most industry leaders are doing right now, or most people are driving in the post-pandemic scenario, is to drive efficiencies in the way that they're doing things so that they can get to market faster. Sounds a little bandied, but time to market has become extremely, extremely critical to ensure that people are able to produce and generate solutions faster. To this extent, they're also spending a lot of time, and I think somebody mentioned this earlier, is to, I think that was Saraf, you mentioned it, about how is it that we can get a lot more agile in the way that we're actually doing our stuff. So agility and ensuring that there is testing done, as what Santosh was mentioning about an outage. Is there a way that we can actually test before we actually go and deploy into production? And I don't want to bring up statements which are slightly more abstruse about DevOps, but actually DevOps is becoming a very, very critical driver in enabling this digital transformation journey across the organization. Break down silos, get the testing done faster, get it into post-production scenarios a lot faster, and make sure that there is collaboration. And as Praveen was mentioning, the tools and the solution sets need to talk to each other constantly and provide one single output or one single pane of glass for you as visionaries to come and make meaningful decisions based on data that can be monetized and that can be used for providing meaningful insights and dashboards which are more relevant to your CXOs. That's the area, and that's what we're seeing most organizations of your scale and magnitude are moving towards. If not, they've already started, they're definitely on the journey. And this entire episode has actually accelerated this journey to a large extent. And we are really excited to be part of that because from an Indian economy's point of view and overall from a market point of view, this is a great time to be partnering with all your organizations so that we can help you with this journey. So I'm really, really excited about what brings forward.
Thank you, Mr. Karthik. And before we close this, we are already 15 minutes over the stipulated time. But the analyst in me has become very, very excited with all the viewpoints that we are listening, and I can go on for another 2 hours. But I'm sure you have another fish to fry, so we'll close it here. But before we close, would you like to add anything? I mean, as an analyst, I have learned a lot. I think this has been a very, very cohesive group because whatever we spoke about the same thing, and when we put all these perspectives together, it kind of enlightens us around how IT is going to evolve, and looking at it from different industry perspectives, be it from supply chain and logistics to fintech, to real estate, to core technology. I think the construct for me in my mind has become much more clearer. So would you like to say something before we say goodbye?
If I'm allowed to speak right up front, I'm sorry for jumping in, but for me, it's always an amazing eye opener because it sort of resonates for us to be able to hear people at your level and come and talk about what's shaping the future for you and what is key important for you. It's so relevant because it gives us so much of direction in the way that we want to go and approach the solution sets in the market. Your inputs actually help us drive our conversations further with our customers because these are practical, from the grounds up reality that you're bringing up, right? And for us, this is a constant learning. And I am, for one, are extremely happy that we keep getting these platforms to collaborate and ensure that we're able to learn from you and see how is it we can do course correction. So I'm very, very thankful to the inputs that every single one of you has provided.
Okay. So thank you so much, Mr. Saraf, Mr. Hebagodi, Mr. Banga, Mr. Giranje, and Mr. Karthik. Thanks a ton for taking time out of your schedule and being here. And I learned a lot. I hope you also learned from others' perspectives. And believe me, we are friends for life now. So we'll again meet and discuss and talk.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.